Hey everyone, it's Eddie Kalegi reminding you that each and every episode of Sports Speak is powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a one-stop shop for tickets to concerts, sporting events, and so much more. And now you can use the promo code SportsSpeak on the site to get $20 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? SeatGeek, let there be live. And now on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak Live, powered by SeatGeek. I'm Eddie Kalegi. Use promo code SportsSpeak, all caps, one word, $20 off your first purchase online. Well, Tim Moore's under the weather today, so I'm running this one solo. Wanted to touch on a couple of things because Super Bowl Sunday is just 2 days away, and the NBA trade deadline just hit yesterday. Got to start with the Super Bowl here. As an Eagles fan, I'm ecstatic. It's so funny how things have gone on this show. Last year at the beginning of the Major League Baseball season, I was hypercritical of the Mets. They started 0-5. I thought they were directionless. I thought the statement that was made that their goal was to be competitive by 2025 was a terrible thing to say before 2024. What happened? The team turned it around. The Philadelphia Eagles, Tim will say it. I had my doubts about that team. They were 2-2. They barely beat New Orleans. They got destroyed by Tampa. They had a horrible loss to the Falcons. I had serious doubts about Nick Sirianni. I still have some doubts about Nick Sirianni. But as a head coach, he's made the playoffs all 4 years and the Super Bowl in 2 of those years. So can't be too critical. And I also can't be critical when the team drops 55 on a division rival to win the NFC Championship game. So I'm quite happy as an Eagle fan right now, and I seriously think they have a chance in this game. Now, is it going to be difficult? Absolutely. Does it matter that the Chiefs have looked unimpressive in most of their wins this year? Absolutely not, because they have the DNA to win these types of games because they've done it 3 times in the last 5 years. Andy Reid has kind of gotten over all of the challenges that he had back when he was the coach of the Eagles, where he couldn't win big games. He certainly wins big games now. Patrick Mahomes, maybe not as impressive as Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow this season statistically, but he's still a proven winner and does what needs to be done to win games. He did it against Buffalo, and we've seen it on multiple occasions over the years that Patrick Mahomes just does enough. Now, do the refs help a little bit? Yes, but Patrick Mahomes is still a talented player. He also finally has a good receiving core again in the post-Tyreek Hill era. Xavier Worthy is one heck of a talent. I don't understand how the Bills made that trade back in April. I had a feeling that was going to cost them, and what happened? Xavier Worthy makes an incredible catch against the Bills in the AFC Championship game and helps lead Kansas City to the Super Bowl. Plus, they got a healthy Hollywood Brown now. They got D-Hop on that roster. I mean, there are weapons for him to work with. And oh, by the way, you still have Travis Kelce, and that defense, while hasn't been as statistically dominant as it was last year, it's a great unit. And as we saw with Spags, when it came down to it against the Bills, they have looks that they haven't used all year that they have in their back pocket. And I just know that Steve Spagnuolo has some looks, has some blitz packages that have not been used all season, but that the team has practiced and are ready to show Jalen Hurts, because the drawbacks for Jalen Hurts are that he can be very indecisive as a quarterback. He holds onto the ball for a bit too long. And when you have a Chiefs pass rush that's as dangerous as this Chiefs pass rush is, it could prove to be a challenge for Jalen Hurts in this game. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the individual matchups in this game, because the NFC Championship, and I said this about the Eagles before, even though Jalen Hurts gets his critiques, and I'll admit Jaden Daniels is a much better quarterback than Jalen Hurts already in 1 year as a Washington Commander, just won AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. But you got to understand that it's not just a quarterback's game. I feel like sometimes we lay too much pressure on quarterbacks because they're the centerpiece of the team. But in reality, there are a lot of other important pieces on a roster. You don't need an incredible quarterback to make it to the Super Bowl. Do you need one to win the Super Bowl? You might make that argument, but Brock Purdy made it to the Super Bowl last year. He's not a great quarterback. Jared Goff has been to the Super Bowl. He's not a great quarterback. I know Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, and you associate the rings with those guys, but you can win games without having the better quarterback. And we just saw that in the NFC Championship game And I'd argue this season in the AFC Championship game, Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels have been better than Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts this season, and their team still lost because they lost in the margins in the other spots. And that's where we get to this. Patrick Mahomes is better than Jalen Hurts. There's no question about that. And Andy Reid, I think, is a better coach than Nick Sirianni. But you go through almost every other position group, and I give the leg up to the Eagles. Of course, you've got AP Offensive Player of the Year Saquon Barkley as your running back. I was critical on this show of the Saquon move as well. I'll admit it because now I see it's not that he was overrated. It's simply he was behind a horrible offensive line and a horribly coached Giants team for 6 years. And that's what hurt him along with the injuries from getting a lot of good stats. He is significantly better than Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco or whoever Kansas City's going to put in the backfield. The receiving core, as good as Xavier Worthy is, doesn't compare to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Tight end battle, Travis Kelce does not nearly have the same leg up these days on Dallas Goedert than he did even 2 years ago when these teams faced off in the Super Bowl. Offensive line, Eagles are the best coached O-line in the league. Defensive line, the Eagles are right there with the Chiefs. Secondary, Eagles are right there with the Chiefs. So Kansas City doesn't have many definitive, favorable, marginal victories in the position groups besides quarterback and coach. And I feel like in the Super Bowl, that's going to be enough to at least keep the Eagles in this football game. I think this is going to go down, be a one possession game either way. It's very, very difficult to pick against the Chiefs. And it's also very, very difficult for me to forget the fact that I'm an Eagles fan and might be a little amped up about this team right now because they've won 14 of their last 15 games. That being said, there are two statistics I wanted to hit before I make my pick. The Chiefs defense has not allowed a 100-yard rusher this season. The Chiefs have not scored more than 30 points in multiple games this year. They've only done it once. Those are the two key stats. Likely, one of those will have to change in this game to determine who wins the Super Bowl. Either the Chiefs are going to have a strong offensive output to outdo Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and whatever the Eagles offense can put together, or Saquon is going to break through against that Kansas City defense. And if one of those trends changes, that's going to determine the result of this game. For me, I will lock it in. I think the Eagles get their second Super Bowl here. I think they win by a possession. I think it's going to be close. I think Patrick Mahomes will certainly be right back in this game next year. But right now, I just think there are too many matchups. This is the same thing I felt about the NFC Championship game. Besides Jaden Daniels over Jalen Hurts, the Commanders were really not better than the Eagles in any other positional group, and they lost by 32. Yes, this isn't the home environment in Lincoln Financial Field like that game was, but the Eagles have enough advantages in other spots besides quarterback and coach, and the quarterback and coach difference isn't as big as some people might make it out to be, that I think the Eagles are going to be able, in the margins, to win this game by a possession. So I got the Eagles winning on Sunday. Now let's go to the NBA here. Trade deadline just passed, and of course, maybe the craziest in-season trade in years in the NBA as Luka Doncic, out of nowhere in the middle of the night on a Saturday, gets shipped off to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, the Lakers, they get their franchise guy. That's been the story of that team for years, decades. They always have one. And now, when LeBron James finally hangs it up in a couple of years, they can transition right to Luka Doncic as their next franchise guy. I don't know what Nico Harrison was thinking. And he says defense wins championships. Where have you been in the last 15 years in the NBA? Defense does not win you championships anymore. You got to be able to score the basketball. Luka Doncic is a transcendent talent. He's a top 5 player in the game. And you traded for Anthony Davis, who, while he has turned back the clock a little bit the last year or two, he's also made of glass. Like, it makes no sense. And then to insult Luka Doncic and say his conditioning is bad makes no sense. You have one full season of Luka and Kyrie as teammates. It somehow works. You get all the way to the finals, and all you do is lose to a juggernaut in the Celtics. You're back in playoff position this year, even in spite of the fact that both Kyrie and Luka have dealt with injuries, and then you just cut ties. I feel like there's still going to be more to this story at some point. Doncic was shell-shocked. It's unbelievable the fact that in a league where the stars seem to run things and a Lakers organization where it appears LeBron James runs things, that neither LeBron nor Luka were consulted about this trade at all, and it just kind of happened behind the scenes. I did not think that was possible in this current NBA, but it shocks me. I think for the Lakers, plus the addition of Mark Williams at center to replace Anthony Davis, they are built to go on a deep run in the playoffs this year. LeBron certainly still has it. He's 40 years old. He just dropped 42 points to win a game against the Warriors. And now with Luka Doncic on the floor, he's not going to have to do as much. Now, they both play a similar game. I'm interested to see how that works out because there's been a trend with stars that play a similar style. If they're ball dominant or if they're wings like Kawhi and Paul George, that it doesn't really sync and it hurts the team performance. But one pair that kind of defied those odds were two ball dominant point guards in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, who figured it out. And even with Kyrie's crazy personality, they figured it out and they got to the NBA Finals. So when you've got Luka Doncic, who's just able to do that with Kyrie, and then you've got the greatest player in the history of the league in LeBron James, I think you'll be able to sort it out. So I'm pretty confident if I'm the Lakers. My only question is JJ Redick's coaching. I know LeBron basically runs the show, but there's still some X's and O's that JJ Redick has to handle from a situational standpoint. Will he be able to overcome some great coaches in the Western Conference like Mark Dagnall at OKC, Mike Malone in Denver? That still remains to be seen. But the Lakers certainly got better. And I just don't understand what the Dallas Mavericks direction is right now. You got Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, who are both on the north side of 30. I don't know how it's going to work. They claim this is a short-term move, but with how stacked the Western Conference is right now, do you really want to be making short-term moves? I think you should be building out long-term. And it just shocks me that the two teams that made it through one of the most competitive Western Conferences ever last year, the Mavs and the Timberwolves, have disbanded their rosters that were so impressive down the stretch last year. Didn't understand Minnesota trading away Karl Anthony Towns when he clearly wanted to still be there. Didn't understand the Dallas Mavericks getting rid of Luka Doncic when he still clearly wanted to be there. So, great move for the Lakers, terrible move for Dallas. Two other trades I wanted to mention. The De'Aaron Fox move I really liked to San Antonio. It felt like this Kings team kind of peaked with that run when they had that crazy playoff series with the Warriors 2 years ago. Didn't really feel like there was much further they could go. De'Aaron Fox, though, is still young. Chris Paul is not a long-term solution with Victor Wembanyama. De'Aaron Fox is, and the Spurs really didn't have to give up that much. So if you're San Antonio, you're a big-time winner of this trade deadline. I think they're going to mesh really well together, Fox and Wembanyama. Seeing Zach LaVine move to Sacramento, I feel like that's just a placeholder spot for him right now. I think eventually he's going to find a home on a more competitive team, but the Bulls just needed to shake something up because they've kept their roster basically intact for 5 years and are at best a play-in team, and we really haven't seen any growth with that roster. So kind of weird with the other pieces in that trade, but for the Spurs, absolute home run bringing in De'Aaron Fox to pair him up with Wemby on a Spurs team that has Chris Paul on their roster and is on the precipice of competing for a play-in spot with how stacked together the middle of the Western Conference is. And I think the De'Aaron Fox move does enough to move them up. Wemby's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Chris Paul's having a great season, and no matter where Chris Paul goes, I know he's a journeyman now. He's played in essentially half the Western Conference, but where you have Chris Paul on your roster, you win games. That Thunder team the bubble year was not that impressive. Chris Paul goes there with a bunch of young kids and gets them to the 5 seed. Once again, Chris Paul has found a role with San Antonio. Now he's going to be able to come off the bench and I think be a little more of a leader with the second unit. And what's going to happen? I think the Spurs make the playoffs. Other move that's, of course, notable is Jimmy Butler after the Odyssey. Multiple indefinite suspensions, the meeting with Pat Riley. Kevin Durant then shuts down a trade that would have sent him to Golden State. And now Jimmy Butler is with the Warriors, too. I think that's going to be a mess. Steve Kerr can barely handle having a coach Draymond Green. Now he's got to deal with the chaotic personalities of both Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler on his roster at the same time. I don't see how that works. I don't see how that works with Jimmy Butler being ball dominant and wanting to shoot the basketball. Butler's someone who thrives without co-stars, and having Steph Curry on that team, I don't know how that's going to gel. And I think most importantly, you have two alphas now in that locker room in Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. We saw what happened with Draymond Green and Jordan Poole. I don't see how those two are going to click. Miami, clearly it was a fragmented relationship that could never be repaired with Jimmy Butler. As a Heat fan, though, I think you should be appreciative of the time he has spent with them. despite the way it ended this year, he took them on not one, but two improbable runs through the Eastern Conference to the finals. And while he didn't bring them a championship, he was the best player on multiple Miami teams that upset the Bucks multiple times, had that upset over the Boston Celtics, nearly beat the Lakers in the bubble championship, nearly beat Denver for the title 2 years ago. Credit where credit is due. Jimmy Butler had a remarkable tenure with the Heat. Now he moves on to Golden State. I don't think this move really does anything to make the Warriors much better. But those are the three big moves. Wasn't a ton of selling done by the bottom feeders because there's still a lot of teams challenging for the number one pick in this stacked draft class with Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. Washington got rid of Kyle Kuzma. The way Kuzma's been playing might actually make the roster better, not having to have him on the roster. But we'll see how it plays out. As I've said before, the first 3 months of the NBA season don't really matter that much. I know some people don't even care about the regular season. I think now is the time you invest in the NBA season because there's still a lot of movement that can happen in the standings over the next 10 weeks. And now that the rosters are set for the playoffs, I'm really excited to see how the chemistry with these new duos in San Antonio and Golden State and Los Angeles work out. But that'll do it for this episode of Sports Speak. We'll have Tim back next week. Spring training is right around the corner. We'll recap Super Bowl 59, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off here of Sports Speak Live. Enjoy the weekend, enjoy the Super Bowl, and we will talk to you next week.